Today we will celebrate the birthday of Benny Andersson. In this episode we will take a look back at some of Benny's highlights, and we will start by going on location. Let's go back to the 60s, to a place in Stockholm where an up-and-coming star, a young Benny Andersson, used to live. So here we are, back in Central Stockholm, back to the 60s. This is the apartment complex where a young Benny Andersson from the famous Swedish group the Hepstars used to live in. The address says number 4V, so he was probably living on floor 5, which is one of the two upper floors. Here is a glimpse into the entrance area. This is where he came and went. In a street not too far away from here, Benny shot one of his more popular photographs in 1966. And this is the backside of the building. From here, you can actually see Stockholm's town hall in the distance. Maybe you remember from last time that this is where Benny had his very first stage appearance at the age of 8. For our next film, we will stay in the 60s, but move to another continent. This is Benny's trip to Africa, his adventure of trying to make his first feature film with his first band before ABBA. Today's episode will be exciting. We will go on an exotic trip to Africa back to 1967. 10 years before ABBA made their first and only feature film together, Benny was trying to make a film with his first band before ABBA, the Hepstars. This turned out to be quite a disaster. Why did it fail, and what happened to this film? It is one of the most fascinating chapters in our ongoing exploration of the ABBA members in movies. An adventure with some fascinating connections. Hey! So, when we explored the movies with Agneta and Frida, we noticed that those films don't really have musical contributions from the ladies. They are dramatic narrations with focus on acting. Benny's African film is special for several reasons. For one thing, like ABBA the movie, this was an actual musical film with songs and performances by Benny and his band. For another thing, however, I should say it would have been a musical film. The movie was shot, conceived and planned to be released, but eventually Habari Safari was aborted and abandoned. The movie was never finished and remains unreleased. The background story for all of that is very intriguing. In 1967, Benny's band the Hepstars was one of Sweden's most successful and celebrated rock bands. By that point, they had released 2 studio albums and 1 live album, which was ranked by an American rock journalist as one of the best live albums ever. The Hepstars were now about to make their first feature film. The inspiration came from several circumstances. It was inspired by the 2 musical films from the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night and Help, and also by the Hepstars' second album, simply titled The Hepstars. It was released in December 1966. For this album, 3 music videos were made. Those videos set the foundation to create a feature-length film. The videos were shot in black and white and were meant to make up a third of the film, framed by new sequences in color. This had to happen on an exotic location. Early plans included South America, Mallorca or the Canary Islands. In February 1967, the Hepstars finally traveled to Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya in Africa, to shoot the main scenes for Habari Safari for 2 weeks. The film was directed by Åke Björklund. He also directed the 3 music videos in black and white, and he was responsible for the film's cinematography as well as the screenplay. As we can see, the team for this film was kept as small as possible. This would turn out to be fatal and one of the reasons for all the chaos that would soon arise. But the actual story and concept of the film seemed to be charming and quite clever. The Hepstars had an advertising deal with the producer of a British puppet, the fluffy Kluk doll. The band was supposed to establish the doll in Sweden. With their film, they somewhat tried to kill two birds with one stone. The plot was that the Hepstars would travel to the mysterious land of the Kluks to search for the original Kluk, in whose left eye the great secret was supposedly hidden. Originally, the ending of the movie was a surreal sequence where the Hepstars were chased down into a muddy puddle and reappeared in a swimming pool in Stockholm. Additional filming took place in Copenhagen, Denmark, in the fields of Uppsala, Sweden, which supposedly looked like the African desert, and in Stockholm for a revised ending sequence. According to the director, there was a 600-page manuscript for the film. However, lead singer Svenne Hedlund said that there was hardly any script at all and that it was jotted down at the airport and on the plane. An article from the Time reported that the screenplay was written while the film was being made, and that is always a bad sign for the fate of a movie. But what exactly led to a complete collapse of this exotic cinematic adventure? It starts with the intention of the whole project. The filming was described as chaotic. This is confirmed by the various memories of people involved, which are all completely different to each other. Some members of the Hepstars thought that the main reason to go to Africa was to have a holiday. Most of the time they were seen swimming and soaking up the sun. In complete contrast, however, lead singer Svenne said, "We had to work our asses off, from morning to night, every single day." As we noticed, the movie would have needed more crew members to result in anything. In addition to that, the filming also led to confused meetings between the group and local inhabitants. It didn't get easier with post-production. The footage turned out to be incoherent, no story could be found, the plot was described as insensible. The editing turned out to be impossible and didn't result in a consistent, watchable film. At one point, a young filmmaker was consulted. His name was Lasse Hallström, the future director of ABBA's music videos and ABBA the movie. Lasse Hallström tried to rescue Habari Safari in post-production, but even he could not make any sense of it and failed. The film was supposed to be ready in the summer of 1967, then postponed to autumn and eventually shelved and never released. In 2004, a documentary on Swedish TV showed for the very first time original film footage, even with sound and songs, reconstructing the troubled production of the failed movie. The only thing that really came out of this film was the next single from the Hepstars from April 1967, two of my personal favorite songs, Malaika and It's Nice to Be Back. The film story would have been mixed with music, mainly by the Hepstars, but even from other groups as well. Beside the three songs from the Hepstars' second album, these two brand new songs would have been featured. Benny's own composition, It's Nice to Be Back, would have been the closing song for the revised end sequence, where the Hepstars returned to Stockholm on a ship. In 1971, this song was recorded in Swedish by an artist called Frida, produced by Benny, and became Frida's first #1 hit on the Swedish charts. The second new song would have been the African folk song Malaika, a song that the Hepstars only happened to hear on their stay in Africa when it was played by local people at their hotel. Malaika became another #1 hit for the group for 5 weeks. In 2015, Benny returned to movie production. Together with his son Ludwig, he produced the fantasy film Cirkeln. In one of the scenes, Malaika is played on the radio. So with this film, the African song from the Hepstars finally made it into a movie. These ballad-type songs also show the musical development of the Hepstars at the time, who started out as a rock and roll band and continued to explore different styles, including pop, folk and baroque pop, with more focus on their harmonies. Who knows where Benny and the group would have been if the movie had been finished and released in 1967. 10 years later, Benny would finally be successful with his next movie project, a film about the Australian adventures of his new band, ABBA the movie. I hope you enjoyed today's trip to the movies, to Africa in 1967, and the connections to Benny and his future in the music business. Benny's development in music was obvious even in those early days, but his later use and fascination with synthesizers is one of those many secret ingredients to the sound of ABBA. And once again, we have to go back to the late 60s and first of all, briefly talk about an artist called Wendy Carlos to understand Benny's signature sounds on synthesizer. Here is one of my favorite videos, ABBA as synth pioneers. We're celebrating the birthday of Wendy Carlos. If you're wondering now, who is Wendy Carlos? Was she in ABBA? No, but we'll get back to ABBA, to Benny and his synthesizers, which is one of ABBA's secret weapons, sometimes even overlooked. And Wendy Carlos will bring us there. Hey. So, Wendy Carlos is a pioneer of electronic synth music. She did the soundtrack to Walt Disney's science fiction film Tron from 1982, one of the first films to use extensive computer-generated images. She also wrote and recorded music for Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange and The Shining. But most importantly, she revolutionized the use of synthesizers in popular music with an album called Switched on Bach, which brings us back in time to the late 60s. This first album of hers was released in 1968 and it contains music by Johann Sebastian Bach, but performed on a Moog synthesizer by Wendy Carlos. So the album mixes classical music with electronic sounds. What a fascinating match! It was successful and an enormous influence for musicians to use the Moog synthesizer, especially in popular music. In the following year, George Harrison was one of the first rock musicians to record and produce an electronic music album using the Moog synthesizer. He then introduced his other bandmates from the Beatles to the Moog, and in the same year they used it prominently on their final recorded album, Abbey Road. That album would be very different without those layers of synthesizers. Now when it comes to ABBA and Benny Andersson, I don't know if he ever mentioned Wendy Carlos anywhere. If someone knows anything, please let us know in the comments below. But, of course, I would be very surprised if he wasn't aware of Wendy Carlos and especially Switched on Bach. We know that Benny is a great fan of classical music, especially the music of Bach, and he's a great fan of synthesizers. So Switched on Bach should have been a perfect album for him. In fact, in the early 70s, Benny would be playing on a very similar album in concept. We'll talk about that in a moment. What we certainly know is that he was inspired to buy his first Mini Moog after hearing a song called Popcorn from 1972, a synth-pop instrumental recorded by the American instrumental band Hot Butter, which became a hit in Europe. That song was originally released in 1969 by Gershon Kingsley, who was another pioneer of electronic music and the Moog synthesizer. It obviously came just 1 year after Switched on Bach, so it might have been another one of those songs inspired by Wendy Carlos. Benny bought his first synthesizers during a trip to London in 1973, the Mellotron M400 and a Mini Moog. In the same year, Wendy Carlos released Switched on Bach 2. Take a look at this artwork. Because, also in 1973, we are now getting to that very special album I mentioned. Benny played Moog on a Swedish album which has an interesting parallel to the concept of Switched on Bach. It mixes modern synthesizers with classical music, but this time in the shape of 12 Swedish folk songs played on Moog. He would also develop this concept later on his 2 solo albums, mixing folk music with synth sounds, especially on the gorgeous album November 1989. Going back to 1973, I don't know when exactly Switched on Bach 2 came out, but the album of Nesta Kalle and his Moog Man was released in November or December that year, so most likely it came after Wendy Carlos' album, and Benny and his gang were perhaps inspired by it, even with the artwork. But what about ABBA and their use of synthesizers? Benny was certainly falling in love with a Mini Moog as soon as he bought it, and from Waterloo on, it was used in all of ABBA's albums and their recordings in 1982, and perhaps it also returned for Voyage. In the studio, Benny did many overdubs with the Mini Moog. He would use it to fill in riffs or snippets, and also to emulate other instruments on the song by playing the same part again on the synthesizer to amplify that specific instrument. Listen to this fascinating example of Dancing Queen.
Känner du igen den här låten? Har hört den förut?
Sometimes Benny filled 16 tracks from 24 available tracks on the tape with layers of synthesizers. Of course, he would use many other synthesizers with the development of ABBA's music, including a Polymoog, which you can hear on the Arrival album, and which is beautifully layered on ABBA the Album, especially on Eagle. It was also used on the first sessions for Voulez-Vous. And finally, I think the crown jewel of his love and use for synthesizers really came in 1979, when Benny got a Yamaha GX1, which was even brought along on tour alongside his beloved Minimoog. As I mentioned, from all of his synthesizers, the Minimoog was the one which was most frequently used in ABBA's music. Remember that the Moog synthesizer colored switched on Bach, and Wendy Carlos introduced an entire generation of musicians to the world of electronic sounds. Now, to be fair, Wendy Carlos did not really appreciate smaller synthesizer systems like the Minimoog. She called it a cash-in toy. But as we see, Benny, on the other hand, was extremely positive about it. He described it as the best synthesizer with a very own sound, soft and musical, and that quote was even from the late 70s. So we have these contrasting views of two musical masters, and I think this shows exactly why ABBA's use of synthesizers throughout their music is so special. They were secret pioneers of how to use synthesizers without making it too obvious. Benny's synthesizers are impeccably interwoven with the remaining tapestry of instruments and layers of vocals, especially with the evolution of ABBA's music and production. They always loved that mixture of acoustic and electronic sounds. The way they are mixed within the sound bed is such a natural ingredient of the overall package. They are shimmering over ABBA's songs like a sparkle, and that sparkle started in 1968 with his mesmerizing, revolutionary album by Wendy Carlos. And by the way, there are two other curious connections between ABBA and Carlos. The style of Tron, which she wrote the music for, was a confirmed influence for some of the costumes of ABBA's new show Voyage. And the Voyage album has an artwork which shows a solar eclipse. Wendy Carlos is a passionate photographer for solar eclipses. She developed special techniques for it, and her work has been published by NASA. As I said, pure coincidences, but lovely how it somehow comes together in a way. It does bring us back to the present day, to ABBA's big return, which we are celebrating this month, and to one of my favorite artists, so happy birthday to Wendy Carlos, wherever you are. Alright, until then, hej då! The finale for today is one of my favorites and one of yours. Here is The Eternal Friendship of Björn and Benny. Last time we talked about the strong bond between Frida and Agneta and our favorite moments when they expressed their appreciation and love for one another. Today I want to keep it a bit more sentimental and give it up for Björn and Benny. Their friendship and working relationship is soon going on for 60 years. We know from many duos that this is not taken for granted. They have all fallen out. Paul McCartney and John Lennon, Simon and Garfunkel, the Everly Brothers, and even Oasis. Björn and Benny have never fallen out. What makes their friendship so precious and eternal? Let's revisit the moment when they actually opened up about it. Hey. So, like last time, today's video also takes us back to two crucial moments. Once again, one from the very early years and one from recently, from last year in May, when Björn and Benny had their most recent moment together in an interview. This is what Benny had to say.
What we've achieved together, keeps us together.
He said that they've shared so many things, which goes for the ladies too, Frida and Agneta. This eternal bond always seemed to have its foundation in compassion and loyalty. In Björn and Benny's case, it takes us back to 1971. We talked about this important moment last year, but it is so precious that I want to bring it back. It was an idyllic summer's day in July 1971. Björn was about to receive an important offer from manager Stig Andersson. He should become the new house producer for Stig's record company Polar Music. Stig took a boat ride with Björn to approach him with his offer, and Björn's answer would prove his loyalty and courage to his friend Benny. Björn replied, "I'd love to come working for you, but you've got to take on Benny as well. I won't take the job without Benny." Stig cleared his throat. "Well, I really can't afford to hire more than one guy." Björn gazed out over the lake and thought for a second or two. If we split the salary, will you then take on the two of us? And that's what Stig did, and because of the loyalty of Björn, Björn and Benny became the new house producers of Polar Music. Benny never forgot Björn's faithful action. It was a damned generous gesture on Björn's part. In an interview from 2012 for Finnish TV, Benny said this about Björn.
Är ni bästa vänner?
Jag och Björn? Ja, det tror jag kan säga. Vi är i alla fall våra äldsta vänner. Björn och jag, vi har känt varandra i 45 år, tror jag. Så det är helt otroligt. Så man har liksom som en brorsa.
On the same occasion, Björn was asked about Benny. This is what he said.
Björn,
Ja.
vad är det bästa med Benny?
Han är vänfast, han är lojal, man kan lita på honom till 100%. Han är ofta rolig och han är oerhört begåvad. Han är som en bror.
Last year, they were asked why they think this friendship has endured. Benny said, "We rarely meet. Actually, we meet like every week, but that's about work. But we don't socialize, we don't go out for dinner or visit each other's homes to have a drink." He also said that they've never fallen out. They constantly have their difference of opinions, but Benny said that it doesn't matter.
Because what we've achieved together, keeps us together, I think.
Yeah.
We've shared so many things. Goes for the ladies too, I think, Frida and Agneta. So, no, we're good.
Yeah. It's fantastic, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
57 years.
Yeah.
Björn and Benny have written the soundtrack of our lives. They united Agneta and Frida in voice and music. I think it's indicative that the ladies never recorded together as lead performers for any other songwriter apart from Björn and Benny. Let's give it up for Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus. And of course, let's give it up to Benny Andersson. We are celebrating his 78th birthday today. Let me know your favorite moments of Benny, his favorite projects, what makes Benny Andersson so special in your life, in your heart. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed today's best of, exploring the music, the life and adventures of Benny Andersson. And of course, Benny gave us a brand new musical offering this year, an entire album of new music. We are going to talk about this one next time. Happy birthday, dear Benny. Alright, until then, hey do.